I know that there are some hardcore McFarlane fans out there that think that every time McFarlane sneezes, his snot could literally like cure COVID, or they believe that the Fountain of Youth is just basically a puddle of McFarlane sweat droplets. Well, if you are one of those people, I would like to apologize in advance because I'm going to be brutally honest here, and even though I consider myself a huge McFarlane fan, there's going to be some pretty heavy facts, some pretty heavy, I wouldn't say heavy, but there's definitely going to be some criticism from my part because I feel like McFarlane has really missed the train when it comes down to army building, and that's what today's list is. We're going to be looking at the top 5 army building action figures that I think McFarlane needs to release now. I know that especially McFarlane is always talking about repainting or re-releasing things, and I think this is a really big opportunity that he's been missing out on, simply because when it comes down to army building, you can add little variations here and there, even if it's like the same body mold or multiple body molds but same head sculpts. I think you can save a lot of money if you're McFarlane that way. And obviously he's a business, he's always looking for things like that. So I feel like he's really missed out on some really easy army building that could be going on in a lot of DC multiverses, causing mayhem, causing chaos. And today we're going to be looking at the 5 that I think are the best that he needs to release ASAP. So let's get straight into it without further ado, because by the way, I don't know if you guys read some of the comments in some of my previous videos. There was some heavy criticism towards me because according to some dude, I was spending way too much saliva, way too much time talking and rambling, and my videos needed to be shorter. And honestly, there's no guarantee that I'll start doing it, but I'll try my best because I do tend to ramble from time to time. But the dude was like, your video should have been like half of what it was. So I just thought it was really interesting. But anyways, I'm doing it right now. I'm rambling. Let's start off with number 5. What about some Court of Owls action figures? As I said, it's a really easy reuse. You're probably going to be using the same head sculpt. Depending on whether you're going to do like female and male characters, you could do maybe like one body mold for the male characters and then one for the female characters, and then just switch out, like I said, maybe different paint applications here and there, but for the most part you can easily reuse this figure. We did get something quite similar with the Talon action figure, depending on what DC comic book run you're reading. In certain cases, Talon is just one character, whereas in other universes it's just the assassins that the Court of Owls uses pretty consistently throughout the comic book run. So they, like I said, they did something similar, but they can really go all out, give us the Court of Owls. And now that we've already received the Talon action figures, I think this would be perfect, especially considering that the Court of Owls storyline has really gotten a little bit of spotlight, specifically with like the newest video game. So I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to finally pull the trigger. Number 4 is kind of a crazy one, but almost pretty consistently throughout almost any comic book run that you've ever read that is featured in Gotham City or that features Batman himself, you usually see a lot of officers. You see a lot of Gotham PD, and I think it's about time that we got some just basic Gotham policemen. Now, in this particular case, it'd be kind of difficult to army build if, you have to create different head sculpts for each individual figure. So I just decided to have this one be like Gotham riot gear. Maybe you could just have them wear like some sort of helmet. And again, just have a male body mold and then have a female body mold. That way you can easily reuse them, and you can actually throw them in a display with, maybe we don't have one yet, but eventually if we get like a Jim Gordon or just Batman himself with like, helping out Gotham's PD, control a menace or something like that. It's something that's really easy for McFarlane to throw in there. I think they already have like a White Knight Joker that had somewhat similar like riot gear. You could easily give him a couple of accessories, like maybe a shield, a baton, or a pistol or something along those lines. And like I said, really easy for him to just port these into like multiple different waves. They don't even have to be one particular wave. You can just throw these, fit them into like a random Build-A-Figure figure and just have people go crazy for these, or have them like in a 2-pack like, I don't know, Target exclusive or Walmart exclusive or something like that. Just give the fan base some extra figures to really spice up their display. For our third spot, I decided to go with some Brainiac bots, especially considering it seems like McFarlane is actually interested in this villain. We did just recently receive an Injustice version, but I think a comic book accurate Brainiac is just around the corner, and I personally feel like it would display incredibly well to have a really good comic book accurate, or at least somewhat accurate representation of Cyborg, along with some of his bots around him, a small little tiny army. Same thing, you could probably include this as some sort of like 2-pack for some store exclusive or something along those lines. I don't really see it sneaking itself into like a Build-A-Figure wave, just because we don't want the same situation that happened with the Earth 22 Robins, where people wanted to pick up all 3 different variants, and instead a lot of people were left without being able to complete their Merciless Build-A-Figure figures because of so many people going out of their way to pick up the Robins instead of, you know, actually completing the waves. So hopefully they decide to do, like I said, something like a 2-pack or something where it's not going to affect an entire wave, and they could easily just reuse the exact same body mold, just throw in like an extra head sculpt, or have some that are like battle damage. We see this a lot, or have like a slightly different paint job. We see this a lot with McFarlane. He's been doing those platinum edition figures where they're either like all gray, or sometimes they have like a slightly different paint application or slightly different colors applied to it. That could be something that he could throw out there, have them vary just enough to where they actually look like an army. So that's our third spot for today's list. Let's move on to the second spot, which honestly might anger a few people because this has already been technically kind of visited by McFarlane. He did release the bank robber Joker, which came with an alternate head sculpt, which could be kind of used as a little bit of like an army builder depending on how you looked at it, but there still are some missed opportunities here. You can basically just reuse the exact same body mold and just add extra head sculpts, or vice versa, depending on how McFarlane would want to handle it. But if you guys have watched The Dark Knight or the beginning of the Dark Knight film, you guys will notice that he does have a pretty decent sized crew. If I'm not mistaken, it's like 5 different individuals in his crew. So there's still some decent opportunity there, especially considering that the previous release, I believe, was like a store exclusive, and now if you want to purchase him or if you want to pick him up, he's roughly about like $60. So I think it's a really easy re-release. I'm sure there's some body sculpts here and there that he can reuse from previous entries into the DC Multiverse line. But it's a really cool crew to have if you already have the Dark Knight trilogy action figures, and especially if you have a Heath Ledger Joker already in your display. I already feel like there are people that are feeling some pain, some anguish because of this entry. Like I said, we already technically received this, at least to an extent, but I still feel like he can expand on it. I still feel like there's a little bit more room in there if he wanted to decide to build out or flesh out that crew. So that's our second entry. Now let's move on to the top spot on today's list, where I think deservedly so, I decided to put the mutants from the Dark Knight Returns comic book universe. There was also an animated film if you wanted to check that out. It was in 2 parts, but I think it's time that we finally got these action figures. We did get a mutant leader for the 4-inch Page Punchers line, which was kind of a 2-pack that came with a Batman, but we have not received a regular 7-inch from the McFarlane DC Multiverse line, which I think we're long overdue. Maybe they have like 4 different variations of these figures, and then the Build-A-Figure is maybe like the mutant leader. So there's still possibilities out there. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I definitely feel it'd be nice to have a little army around the mutant leader, which is a big villain in the Dark Knight Returns universe. I'm not sure why they haven't decided to put any of the mutants in there. Like I said, the 4-inch Page Punchers line had the mutant leader, but I'm not really too familiar with that line. I don't think anybody collecting the DC Multiverse line is really that interested in the 4-inch Page Punchers line. Regardless, the only reason why I feel like maybe McFarlane is staying away from giving us more of these mutants or the mutant leader might be because they're shirtless and you have to actually sculpt nipples on them. Aside from that, I don't really understand why we haven't received any of these mutants, but they would look fantastic in a Dark Knight Returns display, considering we've already received 4 different characters. If you want to count the armored Batman as another character, that's 5 for this universe, and then I guess the horse is 6. If you want to count it, it's really up to you, but I think it's only a matter of time before we get the mutants for this particular line. So there you guys have it, our top 5 army building action figures that we need from McFarlane. Let me know your comments down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.